Hey guys, my name is RJ, this is The Secret Stacks. In this video, I'm pretty pumped to be reviewing Zenith, the new serialized novel by Sasha Alsberg, of course from Book Utopia, and Lindsay Cummings. And before I get into my review, I just want to acknowledge that reviewing books by booktubers is complex and there's a lot of pitfalls, so I just want to lay out a couple ground rules. Number one, and most important to me, is that all of my reviews are honest. The absolute worst thing that I think you can do with a booktube or any book review channel is to lie to your viewers, lie to your readers. So I will never do that to you guys, I promise. With that being said, I'm also not going to bash any booktubers. I'm in this delicate position both as a part of the community and also looking at it through a critical lens. So the way that I'll do that is if I don't like a booktuber's book, I just won't make a video about it. So the fact that I'm making this video at all should be a pretty good indication of how I felt about the book. Just to give you a brief synopsis, Zenith is a space opera about a couple space pirates led by the Bloody Baroness, or Androma, or Andy, and she's just a really interesting character with a great group of an all-female crew who are forced into a job that they never expected by a person from Andy's past, which just creates a really interesting dynamic of exploring this Mirabelle galaxy, that's what the galaxy is called, and both a lens into the characters and also the galaxy and the worlds themselves. I really appreciate the all-female crew because sci-fi and space operas in particular have been undergoing sort of a tug of war for the soul of sci-fi, especially centered around the Hugo Awards, which if you know anything about the sad puppies or the rabid puppies controversy, it's just there's a lot of predominantly white men who feel that there's too much diversity getting into sci-fi, which I think is absurd. Sci-fi is really the foundation of diversity in literature because there are no bounds, absolutely. So that's why it's really interesting to see such a diverse cast of characters in Andy's crew, because they are written really well and written away from stereotypes in a way that I think only a couple female authors could really do, and it's really refreshing in the genre that doesn't always push the bounds as far as it should in terms of creating interesting characters. And this even extends to the guy, Dex in particular, who is the conflict character. I don't know if you really want to cast him as the villain yet, but in particular, the way that his background with Andy is set up, it's really a driving force of conflict between the characters and really makes their relationship complex, which gives a depth to the story that I really appreciated. Now, after finishing part one, I do have a few points of apprehension with the series as a whole, in particular with the way that it's set up and formatted. If you don't know, Zenith is a serialized novel. They don't know how many parts it's going to be yet, possibly 3, possibly as much as 5. So you're only getting about an hour-long read in the first third or the first fifth of a story. And this creates a couple challenges both in Zenith and in the future parts to come. First of all, there's a lot of info dumping in the first couple chapters, in particular with complex parts of the characters and the galaxy's past, all of which create questions that aren't answered in the first part, which is a little frustrating as a reader. It's interesting because it makes me curious to read the future parts, but it does leave a little bit to be desired in the fact that it's almost a snack versus feeling full after a great meal. The second part that I'm worried about is it took me, like it does in any book, a couple chapters really to get in sync with the characters and their way of speaking and their relationships, and just when I was starting to get comfortable with their dialogue, with the way that they acted and spoke, well, part one ended. And because this serialized novel isn't going to be coming out very frequently, I mean, I think they're just working on part 2 right now, so you can expect to wait 3 or 4 months until part 2 comes out, is I feel like there's going to be a sort of jerky stop and start motion and just really getting back into these characters' lives and getting in sync with them and how they act, which is something that's challenging for me as a reader. That's why in particular the format of this book is so interesting, because Sasha and Lindsay are doing this in a way that almost no other author has ever done. Typically when you self-publish a novel, serialized self-publication was really popular a couple years ago, but you had the parts coming out much more quickly than they do in Zenith, getting a new part every week. Now the fact that they're just getting started on part 2 makes me assume that it's going to be a couple months at least until we get part 2. So it's going to be hard to get into the flow of this series, and I think I'm going to find myself needing to go back and reread part 1 just to get into the swing of things again, which will be fine once part 2 happens, but I'm a little worried about how I feel when part 5 comes around, and will I feel like I need to go back and reread everything, and therefore should maybe I wait until all of the parts are out. Another interesting thing to note, and something I think you should be aware of before buying into the series, is I know Sasha and Lindsay are going out and they're shopping this story to publishers now after part 1, which could lead to a situation where after part 1 it stops cold until we get the entire story when it's traditionally published, which could be a bit of a bummer just because the speed at which traditional publishers turn out new books, at best it could be a year, 2 years until you see the next part of this if they sell the entire series to a traditional publisher. Now, just because that can happen doesn't mean it will happen. In particular, they could keep their digital rights and just sell the physical rights to a traditional publisher. So we will get each part of the serialized novel, but there will be in physical bookstores a traditionally published physical copy, which will be pretty cool. I know I've been talking a lot about the format, almost as much as the story, and that's because they're doing so many interesting things and so many things that are against the grain of the status quo in self-publishing that I just find that really fascinating. At the end of the day, with Sasha in particular, her platform at a Book Utopia, this book launch almost can't fail, so it does give them a freedom to experiment with things that not any other author could do. So I think that's pretty cool, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm also selfishly interested in this because I own a digital marketing consulting company, and I've worked with self-published authors on putting strategies out there, so it'll be interesting to see how this works and break it down. Now, I don't really want to get into the financial aspects of this because I don't really feel comfortable without talking to Sasha and Lindsay about breaking down the financials of their business, of their livelihoods in a video without that complete information. So if possible, I may do a video on that in the future. If you're interested, let me know. But again, I have to decide for myself what I feel comfortable with in breaking this down as a member of our community and also an author who I don't know either of them personally, but I just want to make sure that I do this respectfully and right. But at the end of the day, really enjoyed reading part 1. Very interesting to see the next part and the whole series just to see where it goes. So I would definitely recommend, especially at the $1.99 price point, it's really interesting to see a member of our community put something out there. And also something that I didn't mention, it's a very impressive showing of co-authorship because it's not an easy thing to do, especially in a space opera, which is very complex and a lot of back world building. They do it really well. It flows seamlessly and you don't know who wrote what part. So that's a credit to those two in that they have such a great both working and personal relationship. You should see their videos together because they really are friends as well as business partners. And I think that's what makes it so successful. So I'm curious if you guys have read Zenith and what your thoughts are. So let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, see ya.